Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. My name's Ryan and I'm so glad you're here. The goal of this channel is to resource faith for your heart, soul, and mind. Today I'm going to be looking at the problem of evil and suffering and showing you how this might actually be one of the greatest evidences that there is a good God. That's coming up. Okay, so the problem of evil and suffering. I'm sure all of us at some point in our lives have had to wrestle with this idea. Maybe it's through personal loss and tragedy or things that you've seen in the world around us. All of us each day are actually confronted with this idea that there is something wrong or evil or problematic about our world. Now, normally what begins to happen is that this can actually be one of the things that combats faith in our life, because when we see the evil or injustice that starts to happen, we start to say things like, well, if there was a good God, how could he allow something like this to happen? This is a really deep and profound question, and if you've ever asked this question, I want you to know you're not alone, and you have the right to ask questions like this. This is not out of bounds, even if you are a Christian. This is not something that you should be afraid to wrestle with, because there are going to be those moments where something it hits you right in the gut, and it causes you to really wonder, God, how could you have allowed this to happen? When the problem of pain and evil arises, a lot of us start to question, does God actually exist? So when it comes to good, evil, pain, suffering, we have to begin to look at what are the possible explanations of a worldview that includes good and evil. Because regardless of philosophically good and evil is a real thing, all of us experience it. And so we have to begin to look at what are the explanations for why evil exists. One of the explanations you're going to hear about a lot, especially if you come from a worldview that would not consider God a real thing, that God is just something that humans have fabricated and made up across the span of history, is that you're going to hear that right and wrong, good and evil is all a social construct. It's all something that has been created by our society to help us evolve and to help us not go into extinction. The thinking goes like this, that as a human race, we decided, look, if we don't band together and create some kind of boundaries, some kind of laws, some kind of things that are constructed to help us live life as a society, then we're going to face extinction like a lot of other animals. So in other words, what they're saying is that good and evil is actually something that has been created by our society. So when someone says, hey, don't steal because you're going to hurt your neighbor, and in turn, what happens is if our society has enough people that are stealing from one another, we probably won't actually survive. And so we have to kind of create these things. This is a valid explanation. This is something that if you believe this is not crazy, it's not illogical, but I do believe that there are some points in it that are really suspect. I think there's some things that if you believe this way, that you're open to questioning. And so the question is not just, can we find an explanation? The question is, can we find the best explanation? And this is where I believe this falls a little bit short, and I'll tell you why. See, whenever someone commits a crime or they commit an evil or they harm someone, if this was your worldview, then what you could say at the very best is say, I don't like that, but you could never actually say this is wrong. Here's what I mean. If our societies have created or constructed morality or constructed what's right and wrong, then at the end of the day, they're not things that actually exist in real time. They're just things that we've created to help us. So when someone steals your car, it's not really wrong. It's just something that appears to be wrong. Now, it might seem a little trivial when it comes to your car or when it comes to something a little bit smaller, but let's take this one step further. What about places where people are abused or raped? Or what about places like in Nazi Germany where 6 million people faced genocide? At this point, we can't just say, well, their culture created that construct and it was okay for them. We can't just say, oh, well, that was only wrong for us. No, at some level, all of us know that's just wrong. And if we really believe that it's not just a construct of wrong, but that it's actually wrong, we have to have a foundation for which we say that. And to be honest, if your idea of where right and wrong comes from a social construct, then this is where you hit your lid. Because this is the point where you say, you know what? At the end of the day, we're all just dancing to our DNA. And if some people's DNA causes them to dance to the tune of killing millions of people, then they're just dancing to their DNA, and we're stupid to try and fight it, or we're silly to try and say that that's actually wrong. We can only at best say, I don't like that. And we all know that this is not how we live our life. We know that things are actually right and actually wrong. Now, the line of what's right and what's wrong may seem different to you, but we all kind of believe that there is such a thing as wrong, or that's not right. Anytime your 3 or 5-year-old says that's not fair, they are appealing to a greater moral standard. And this is where God is the best explanation. When we think of moral law, it actually points us to a moral law giver. It points to somebody who shows us that there is a right and there is a wrong. And the pain and the suffering that we experience in this life is actually an indicator that something is not as it should be. You know, if you've ever broken a bone in your body, the pain is actually not the problem. See, the problem is that there is an injury, there is something going wrong in your body, and so the pain notifies you that something is out of whack or out of place. And this is exactly what evil does for us. Evil lets us know that something is just not as it should be. And what is that should be, or what is that ought to, or what is that right? That is where God has set a moral standard. See, God is an unmovable, uncreated being who has created, and according to his character, created morality for us to understand and lived by this morality. You know, I love the song by Switchfoot called "The Shadow Proves the Sunshine." You know, if we were to look around and only see darkness everywhere, it wouldn't point us to anything. But the cool dichotomy is that darkness is contrasted with beauty and light. And there is so much goodness in our world. And it is this great reminder that there is not just evil, there is not just suffering. That's not all we'll ever have, but that there is a goodness that is found in the source of that light, in the source of that life, God himself. And you know, if you've been going through something tough, you have to recognize that Jesus is God who suffered. God did not leave us in our suffering. He did not leave us in our darkness and our depravity, but he actually came and he joined in and he suffered so that we could experience his life, so that we could have the light that he brings. And so maybe you've asked the question, why hasn't God put an end to evil already? If we see all the suffering going on, why doesn't God just stop it? And the Apostle Peter talks about this when he says that God is not slow in doing this, but that he's actually being patient. There will be a day where Jesus returns and he puts an end to suffering and to evil, and there will be no more tears, no more crying. But until that day, God is actually being patient so that people can actually come to know him. See, if God were to end evil right here and right now, then every single person who has evil in their hearts and who has betrayed people with evil actions, they would actually be held accountable for the evil they've committed as well. And so God is actually being patient to put an end to evil so that he can give us a new heart. This is the beauty of the gospel, that Jesus came not only forgiving our sins, but washing us clean, making it so that we have a new heart before God, so that evil does not stay with us, but evil is broken in our lives. And so this is what's so powerful about God, is that God will put an end to evil. But he is so patient because he wants you. He wants your family. He wants people you've never met. He wants people in the furthest reaches of this earth to enter into a relationship with him, to know his beauty, to know his goodness, and to really become people who are free from evil and suffering itself. This is why God has been so patient. I recognize that this is not simply a philosophical conversation. This is something that hits us at the core of our emotions, because if you've ever experienced suffering or pain or evil, you know how difficult that can be to actually walk through. And so today, I would hope to hear from you. If you agree with me, disagree with me, I would love to hear your comments. What are your thoughts about this? How have you seen God show up even in the darkest moments of your life? How have they pointed you to the good things? I really appreciate everybody checking out this video. I'll see you next time.